Hi there, Michelle from OG Rose. I hope everyone has had a wonderful Christmas and are enjoying a wonderful holiday season and that you'll have a very blessed new year to come. I just wanted to hop on and do a little bit of a personal reflection related to two particular words, peace and then also the word confession. I wanted to reflect on those words, the former being because of just lately thinking and meditating further on the nativity and the birth of Christ and the sights, scenes, smells, feelings that really would have gone into the first Christmas, right? And I was thinking about just in having three natural labors. I'm really grateful I was able to do that. And I'm with child right now. And I think there was something that made it feel, all the more visceral, the anticipation of birth and what that really means, especially for Mary. She would have been, this was her first birth. And it's interesting because while there is I'll get to this part, but what I want to say is that a birth in a stable would really not be all of the sterile words that sometimes are associated with the event of the nativity, like I kept on thinking about peace on earth and how there's something that's not, it's like there's almost a earned peace in the sense that the peace that comes, I think about with labor, is a type of pained peace or a painful peace, but it's also like this kind of earned peace. It's a deeper type of peace that is very palpable and it's pretty radiant, but it's not quiet necessarily, right? There's a lot of I think again about the sounds, the fluids, all of the real kind of messy tactile things of birth that were part of this first Christmas story and an experience. And I think what is interesting to me is how kind of getting in touch with the reality of like animal smells and excrement and all of this is so important to understand was really at the heart of this entrance of a piece of God that came into the world, right? And also for Mary, she's relinquishing a piece of herself, right? Her own body. I mean, a child is not a woman's, in a sense, a child is their own person, but they're incubated by the mother's womb and by the placenta, this organ that's created simply for nourishment of that baby and to help mother and baby through that whole process. And this genesis of in a sense, the newness that comes in what already exists is something that I think is so true about the symbolism of a mother and child in gestation. And Mary, in a sense, has to have the painful relinquishing of a piece of herself, her own flesh, to, this something that's incubated and in her body that she releases into the world that then has this ability to bring great peace. And so I guess I was just thinking about the wordplay there, if I haven't made that clear enough, thinking about the word peace and peace, right? Where there's a piece of, like I said, there's a piece of God in the incarnate Christ child. And there's the piece of Mary's, also just on an abstract level, her identity that she relinquishes in having, in conceiving as a virgin, first of all, right? This is completely taboo for her to be with child before she's married. And this sort of relinquishing of a piece of herself, also quite physically, right? In releasing the amniotic fluid and the baby, the placenta, the umbilical cord, everything that she's held as a construction of her own body that has yielded another body and another life is released as a piece of her that then brings this peace on earth, right? And I guess I wanted to talk about it that way to sort of de-sterilize the understanding of the nativity, because again, this was a piece on earth that was a painful one, but also was a very transcendent piece that comes. And I think if anyone has experienced that, there is a transcendent peace when labor is finished, when the baby's out and you hold the baby for the first time, and it's just this awe and this gratitude, and it's unlike anything that can be described. But you're also very grateful that, you know, the laboring is completed and you get to hold the prize of those labors and efforts, this piece of yourself that is brings its own, you know, its own peace into the world too. And I mean that in the both senses of those words. But there's a type of peace in the tranquility sense of it that comes after that, that comes in the midst and through that pain. That is what peace is. I want to say that is what peace is in the fullness of its nature, because it's easy to think about peace as just the calm, serenity, tranquility, which it is, but it also is by a means that is having to relinquish a piece of oneself, which is rather can be quite a painful process. You know, if we're thinking about physical labor, but also on the abstract level, of having to let go of one's own identity, one's own sense of even understanding, and so yeah, peace. To me, that's helpful. That's helpful because, like, let's say in dealing with certain anxieties, it feels like, oh, I should just be at peace about that, right? But really, there's a painful effort that has to be made to get to that place, right? From a Christian perspective, that could be that relinquishing of such an anxiety or worry, you know, before the Lord, for example. And I guess this could tie in then to the second word I wanted to talk about, which was confession, because I felt that was a word that stood out to me when reflecting upon this past year, because it characterized, in some ways, that was a characteristic of the year that I sort of made a choice about, and has been rather fruitful. And I'm very, very grateful for that, because it's so easy not to let go. Confession is a type of letting go. And it's a very vulnerable thing, because it's confession can also be quite exposing. But it's also, this is why I think it was a practice, considered a regular kind of practice or ritual in, you know, many religions, but, you know, particularly if we think about like, I mean, obviously Catholicism may even have it as a type of, maybe a sacrament. I should probably know if it is technically a sacrament. But anyways, confession is this kind of letting go of a piece of oneself that was not being let out, right? And that confessional process, as relates to anxiety and worry that I was bringing up with, you know, with that conversation on peace and feeling peace and being at peace, is to confess that as honestly as a sin, right? As something that is causing this disruption. But it seems like easier to just keep it than to have the painful process of birth, right? It's like, well, I'll just keep it there forever. But that you wouldn't, honestly, we know from a biological level that wouldn't be healthy for mother or baby, for the baby to stay there all the time, like, you know, much past their time, right? Of needing to be born and being the birthing process. It has to happen, and it has to happen for the baby's continued health and the mother's continued health. So the baby has to be born. The baby has to be born. And I guess as this relates to the confession, it's something that we have to sort of understand to be just as eminent or necessary. Maybe not eminent. Well, if we could see it as eminent, as needing to happen, then we could maybe see it as something that is necessary and that will be for our own health and the health of that peace, which we then let go of and confess or bring before the Lord, or even if it needs to be, as it speaks about in the scripture of James, about like a confession one to the other. So I think about this relationship, because confession can be sometimes, I mean, it depends on what practice one is in, or maybe one does not have a particular practice related to confession. obviously it also acknowledges that something is like wrong, right? Or something is being hidden that is not allowed to be exposed or brought to the light. And obviously one would want to discern, like, have discernment and wisdom about what exactly they just bring to the light to whomever, or in what context, right? But the context of the sacred space, if we just think about confession unto the Lord, or the confession before a priest, or let's say with some sort of ritualistic space, it doesn't have to be necessarily with the priest, but having a particular maybe place of confession, or could even be in nature, or could even be with a trusted loved one, to have that's or the one you've wronged, right? To actually have that space, that seems to be the space that is affording, the birth of that confession that leads to the painful peace, the peace, or I should say this, it is a painful peace, but then it starts to, it's like this pain that must be endured so that the healing can begin. The body can heal again. The baby can be held finally, and this in one's arms, and really seen. And it's in a sense the baby is held in the womb, right? But to be able to actually see the child and to bring forth that which, again, was kind of kept within. There seems to be something quite necessary about this process, but also, like I said, very messy, very, on the abstract level, smelly, maybe cold, difficult. It's not easy, but it does seem to be so crucial at the crux of our becoming, or something like that. I think that's something that I have just been reflecting on a lot. Mary, peace on earth, the peace of God that has come down to bring a type of peace through pain, but nevertheless that peace surmounts that pain in the end. After that, the healing that pain peace creates, right, ultimately is so far and above the superficial, how to say this, the superficial, I don't even want to call it peace, but in a sense it's a superficial, it's okay, right, with the hiding or the keeping or the not enduring the birth process, because eventually that's going to hurt far, far more than the actual confessional birth process that leads to that painful peace. Just thinking about complexifying peace a little bit can be helpful for me, because I think that can also, on a real phenomenological level, help when dealing with, again, like I was saying, if you have anxieties or worries, bringing those things as a type of confession to realize this is something I'm kind of keeping within myself and allowing to, be fed when it's time for it to be. It's not, it's inevitable that we will feel those things sometimes, or have certain experiences, or make certain choices. But then there's a time to recognize that these things need to be confessed, need to be let go of. Now, to kind of, I don't want to say counteract, but to think about child, or the birth of a child as confession is a sort of strange thing, because confession usually has to do with something that someone has done that is wrong, and the child is not a symbol of what is wrong. It's about what is right. With what I mean to say is, like, it's something, the child represents more so the continuation of life. Now one could say, well, the only reason that there's like labor pains and such things like this is in the fall story, or the account, that would be because of sin, right? That there'd be great pain in labor, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe that is the case. It's not so much as the child is like some confessed sin, but that they are a type of confession of the reality of what it means to be human, perhaps, right? The fact that peace does come through pain. And yet there's some, at the same time, though, a lot of sins that are considered, that are thought of as sins on the whole, the actual action of it is not necessarily bad. It's to whom, it's more about the contextual things about it, right? To whom it's being done to, the context, or the disposition toward it. For example, if you lie, it's not the sin to use words, right? It's not a sin to say something. It's a sin because one is in a sense like concealing it and hiding the truth, right? So in that sense, the confession is not so much about the actual content of I used words. It's the fact that I used words in a particular way to satisfy my own internal kind of almost Ouroboros self-relating negativity, versus allowing that something to come out of myself to further truth and to further what is the case, right? So yeah, I just wanted to sort of address that. I'm not trying to make some direct parallel between like birthing a child as confessing a sin, but it's more the act of confession that reveals the truth of our humanness that is similar to me in birth, revealing the truth of our humanness, revealing the piece of ourself that needs to be brought forth. And what's so cool is that then you can say, oh, I see that whatever has been confessed is not, it's like I was saying, say you lie about something, you start to realize that like this piece of yourself that is then relinquished, you start to understand much more about what that was at the heart of it, that had its own sort of force to compel you to even do that in the first place. And then you can say, oh, wait a second, that's actually coming from a good place and a good desire, but it's been misordered, right? But having it come out again almost reorders it or something like that. Or, when it's having the chance to actually bring it to the light is a part of that process of reordering and maintaining the order that is, functional. And like I was saying, there's an inevitability and almost need for us to have an internal space, right, in which we can have, let's just say, worries, or from which lies can come from, etc., right? But that's not, gestation is good. It's a wonderful thing. But what is brought forth from that is going to, be just as important in terms of what is confessed. And confession, I think, also can be simply than merely the creative things as well, in terms of like, if you have a creative work, that's a type of confession too, right? You also, it's not just confessing sins, it's also confessing praise, right? So these things are ordered almost by the confessional process itself, which does, again, reflect to me or relate to me in my reflecting to the process of birth, birthing the child. And yeah, that's probably where I'm going to conclude things today, but I really appreciate you listening to my reflection here. And I'm grateful and honored to have all of your support for Daniel and I and OG Rose, and for what we do. We are so grateful for you. And so anyways, thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a great day. And again, a wonderful new year to come.